and Satoru goes back, saving Kaio basically becomes the main focus of the show. The simple but effective decision to have Kaio as the main focus not only ties back into what I said before about tension, but also allows us to really get to know her and create a lot of emotional substance. This is a child who was constantly beaten, neglected, and yelled at by her abusive mother. A child who, because of this upbringing, developed a somewhat cold personality, and in turn was isolated from the rest of her classmates. A child who's had basically nothing her entire life and wants desperately to escape and go somewhere else where nobody will ever find her, and yet still meets her untimely end at the hands of a serial killer. But now, Satoru has a chance to change things. This time, Satoru goes out of his way to talk to Kaio and get to know her. It's incredibly sweet and heartwarming because this time Satoru is able to give Kaio so many of the things she never had, the beautiful parts of life that she never got to experience before, genuine friends that care about her, birthday parties, having fun exploring places she's never seen, being part of a real family. And all this leads into the most heartbreakingly beautiful scene in the entire show, where Kaio wakes up and Satoru's mom had made her a nice breakfast, and Kaio is speechless. She remembers how her own mother would just leave her cup noodles, which over time just became bread, which then became a few coins to buy it herself. And seeing the homemade meal Satoru's mom made for her, she begins to cry. This is what I believe Erased was really all about. Not just saving Kaio, but giving her what she really needed all this time. It's such a simple yet powerful scene and is the perfect example of what I loved about Erased so much. After this, we move on to the next scene where we finally confront Kaio's mom. It's really tense and exciting and ends the episode on a high note. This is, in my opinion, where Erased hit its peak. But unfortunately, everything from here on out goes on a slow, gradual decline. Now before I get into the nitty-gritty of how this all happens, there are actually quite a few things that people commonly criticize about the last few episodes that I actually didn't mind. One complaint is that Revival, Satoru's time travel ability, is never fully explained as to why he has it. And while I somewhat understand, I honestly feel like it wasn't really the point of Erased in the first place, and sometimes over-explaining things that never needed to be explained can actually be a detriment. Could you imagine if they had tried having a logical explanation for why Bill Murray was experiencing Groundhog Day? It'd ruin the movie. Sometimes a story just has a main idea behind it and you just need to accept that's how the universe in the story works. So long as it's properly established at the beginning, the rules are clearly set, and it doesn't contradict itself for no good reason, then it's honestly fine to just have it stay as a story element that's never fully explained. The other criticism is that the identity of the killer is really obvious. And I agree, pretty much anyone who's looking for it would be able to figure it out really quickly, especially considering he looks almost exactly the same and there's literally no one else who also looks like him. But this isn't a detective show, and again, it's really not the point of Erased in the first place. Heck, trying to find out who the killer is barely even on the forefront of Satoru's mind. I'm perfectly content with a predictable villain so long as they remain as an actual threat and are well written, which is... I'll get to that later, but I honestly think Erased could still easily be amazing even with a predictable villain. Part 2, the gradual decline. The beginning of episode 9 represents the first point where the cracks in Erased started to show. The episode begins right where the previous episode left off, where we finally confront Kaio's mom. Keep in mind, before this, we see Kaio's mom basically go on a full-on rampage, destroying stuff in a blind rage, and only stops when she hears the doorbell ring and she knows that Kaio's back. The scene basically goes as you'd expect it to at first. Kaio's mom is very angry, Satoru calls her out for being a bad parent, the people come to take Kaio into custody as planned, Kaio's mom resists and tries to get the police involved, and then this happens. Kaio's grandma shows up. Then we get a flashback for a few seconds telling us that Kaio's mom was also abused at some point, and then she collapses to the floor crying, heartwarming music plays, and the show now expects us to feel sorry for her. Okay. I'm not here to downplay the emotional trauma that abuse victims go through, since this is a very real thing that many people in real life actually go through. People who are abusive tend to also have been abused, and the show was obviously trying to portray that. My issue with the scene isn't the subject matter or the content in itself. My issue is that the show went about presenting this in a really weird way. Before this, the show really wants us to hate the mom. In almost every scene prior to this, it constantly emphasizes, almost cartoonishly at times, that she is a vile and despicable human being who only cares about herself. Someone who, when she realizes that her own daughter is dead, her only reaction is to be scared the police will find out, who will then go on to smile evilly, throwing out that same dead daughter's belongings and show zero remorse throughout the entire show for all the physical and emotional abuse she put Kaio through. So why would they go through all the effort to do this, only to suddenly bank an entire scene on us feeling sympathy towards her in order for it to work? Backstory or not, the show hasn't done anything before this point to actually earn this moment. It just gives us the token, but she was abused too backstory, and thinks that's enough to change my entire perception of her. And I know this is what the show was trying to do, because while the mom is loudly crying, other characters are also tearing up, signifying to us that it's supposed to be a touching moment, all while gentle piano music is playing. And the cherry on top is that Satoru's mom goes up to her and suggests that even she must have cared about her daughter at some point, which is an almost unintentionally laughable line of dialogue, because not once does it ever show even the tiniest hint of that throughout the entire show. Doing an emotional scene with a backstory worked with Kaio because we already felt sympathetic towards her from the start. All it needed to do was put focus on a specific part of her life that we never really considered before, but that doesn't apply here. Not to mention, the backstory itself is also extremely overly simplistic with how it portrays the subject matter, almost as if it doesn't quite have a full understanding of how abuse victims can become abusive in the first place. Like, it shows the mom getting hit. Then it goes to later when she's all hurt and bandaged up, she holds Kaio's cheek, then turns away, is completely calm, and then for seemingly no reason suddenly turns around again and starts beating her? Like, forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm quite sure there's a bit more to it than that. It speeds through everything that happens so quickly that none of it feels believable. If this wasn't a flashback and was just shown in real time, it'd seem ridiculous. Such a drastic character change like this one, going from caring to abusive, is the sort of thing that needs to happen gradually over time. But instead, this all happens in about 20 seconds, and completely uprooting how we've been seeing a character for the last 8 episodes and making us change our mind on them isn't exactly something that can easily be done within a 20-second Demon Slayer-esque flashback. Like, imagine if it took just a little bit more time. It's really over time. But instead, this all happens in about 20 seconds, and completely uprooting how we've been seeing a character for the last 8 episodes and making us change our mind on them isn't exactly something that can easily be done within a 20-second Demon Slayer-esque flashback. Like, imagine if it took just a little bit more time to show how this level of abuse affected the mom throughout the years, and how she'd slowly become more and more abusive and neglectful over time. Maybe Kaio would say something she didn't like or doesn't listen, and she'd hit her in response, which slowly became more and more frequent. This would add so much to this flashback because we've all had our moments where we get angry or yell at someone, and it makes us realize that any of us has the potential to become this person if pushed hard enough. It wouldn't have required too much more time, but it could have been written in a way with more subtlety and nuance behind it, rather than just doing it in the most predictable and obvious way you could possibly think of. Now, I know I've been rambling on about this for an unnecessary amount of time, and honestly, it really isn't that bad in the first place, especially when compared to some of the stuff that happens later, but the reason I'm nitpicking this so much is because I truly believe that if this scene was just executed a little bit differently, it could have potentially been one of the greatest scenes in the entire show. How? Well, I'm saving how I'd personally do this until the end of the video, but until then, I believe the perfect example of how to do this is Konosuba. Okay, but for real though, originally I had an entire section here talking about Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender, but realized this video is long enough as it is, and since Hello Future Me already did an entire video on it, I might as well just point towards that instead. I'll also be putting the full script on Patreon for anyone who's interested, but the main takeaway here is how while both are characters who suffered abuse and abused others, one earned this moment through layers and layers of build-up and character development, and the other was done on a whim. That's the difference. Okay, let's finally move on. After the confrontation, Kaio says goodbye to Satoru and drives away with her grandma. And honestly, the scene is really good, with Kaio narrating the poem again from the beginning and also adding a whole new layer of meaning to it and the title of the show as they drive away, and Satoru chases after her as they see each other again for the last time, adding a layer of bittersweetness to it all. It's a beautiful scene, although I'd like it much better if it actually happened during the last episode in the show, but I digress. They drive away, it's really bittersweet, but then after a few seconds of Satoru standing in the snow, we start to realize something. Oh. What are we supposed to do now? The episode is just beginning, and Kaio, aka the main reason we're even here right now, is gone, and all the investment I had in the plot left with her. The show puts so much emphasis on her that by the time she leaves and we now have 2 other random kids that we need to save, both of which we don't really know or care that much about, it just feels more like a chore than anything. I'm gonna be honest, I think the writer kind of wrote themselves into a bit of a wall with this part. It's possible they were planning for the 2 other kids to have their own arcs similar to Kaio's after hers was complete, but realized that would be a major drag to go through. I think the writer was well aware at this point that nobody really cared that much about the 2 other kids. Heck, I don't even think they themselves did either, since we barely learned anything about them, but we still had to resolve it regardless, so they just tried to get it over with as quickly as they realistically could. I'm not going to linger too much on this since the solution is fairly obvious. Either you don't establish them at the beginning in the first place, or you find a way to intertwine their stories organically with Kaio's. But again, I think the writer was well aware of that, but it was too late to